I don't think robotic endoscopy, automated robotic endoscopy is all that different from self-driving cars.
If you just take the argument that you're not going to make a specialized robot for specific endoscopic surgery, but you're going to make a robot that replaces what the human does for the specific endoscopic surgery, that becomes a very generally applicable robot, right? Is that fair? You can basically take that robot, humanoid, and use it in different cases.
I love this statement. We are sleepwalking into disaster, he says, criticizing his former bosses. There is no plan. I do not believe for a second that winging it through the biggest economic and technological transition in human history is a responsible way to do things. I want to invite all of you to a new version of the Scope Forward show. I don't have guests this time, but I have co-hosts. Really excited to invite Matt Schwartz from Virgo and Dr. Neil Parikh, gastroenterologist, to participate in this discussion that we are having. And we want to take stock of where AI in GI is going. And definitely it's beyond polyp detection, as we were just chatting. But I'm really excited to kick this version off. To get us going, Neil, please introduce yourself. I'm curious to know what prompted you to be here tonight.
Thanks, Praveen. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Neil Parikh. I'm a gastroenterologist, as Praveen mentioned. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Connecticut GI here in Connecticut and Chair of Innovation for the GI Alliance nationally. What got me here, Praveen? That's a loaded question. I think me and you have talked about something like this for about 2.5 years now. And I think the closest we got to talking about AI and GI or future of GI was maybe at ACG this past fall, where we started talking about really open discussion about where things should go, how do we get there. And part of what we came back to is we need to find a way to spread awareness. And I don't want to use the word educate, because that means that the three of us have the answers, and I don't know if the three of us have all the answers, but really just raise the awareness of artificial intelligence. Because again, like you said, most of us in GI believe artificial intelligence is limited to ambient listening and polyp detection. And there's so much more we can do, but we need to be aware of it.
Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. It's great to be here with you both. My name is Matt Schwartz. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Virgo. We specialize in video capture and AI for endoscopy. In terms of what got me here, I'm a biomedical engineer by training and spent my career in medical devices and medical technology before starting Virgo. But I became very passionate about machine learning and computer vision back in 2015 or so, and saw this future wave coming. Obviously, that wave is now crashing, and I've had a lot of fun conversations with you, Praveen, in the past on the Scope Forward show, and same with you, Neil. And just very excited and maybe sometimes a little bit scared about how fast things are moving. Excites me about being here and to be able to have this conversation is just that things are moving so quickly. It feels really hard to keep up. Chat with the two of you about what's new in the world of AI as another attempt to try to stay on top of things and listen to and share some interesting perspectives around AI. And I try to take a lot of my information from sources outside of GI and even outside of healthcare. And hopefully we can share some of that back into the GI community as well and spur some things forward.
Excellent. I'm very, very excited, more so because I get to learn from the both of you. And this conversation is going to be very, very enriching. Before we jump into the headlines that we are trying to make sense of, I just want to start off with a very broad question. What is the state of AI in GI? Like just taking stock of everything that you know, if you have to just summarize, what do you like about it? What don't you like? Or anything else in between?
This goes back to what we talked about in the fall. AI, artificial intelligence right now in GI seems to be mostly surrounding computer-aided detection of polyps. That's where we're seeing the most literature. That's where we're seeing the most media buzz. And I think that's warranted. it is quite the technological advancement over the past 5 years. I think 5 years was the first time I used a CAD-E implementation or enhancement compared to what we have now available, and it's drastically changed, drastically. And I think it will be the standard of care going forward. When it will become standard of care across the country is to be seen. Praveen will talk about the paper you co-authored that was released just last week or the week before in the Red Journal. And even the paper, one of the consensus statements was that CAD-E is here to stay. We still need literature to really understand the long-term benefits. Will it change the interval colorectal cancer risk? Will it be meaningful in terms of human life and obviously cost analysis? But the short-term data, which is basically identifying more adenomas, more precancerous polyps, is irrefutable. So I believe a lot of what AI and GI is right now is CAD-E. I think the value of what I want to learn from you, Praveen, and you, Matt, is what will artificial intelligence really be for GI in the next 3 years? Because I think this is a 3-year horizon. This is not a 10-year horizon or a 15-year horizon. This is a 3-year horizon. And you can see it, we were talking right offline, Matt, you mentioned the foundation models and the echo and the sleep study you were talking about. There are other fields that are probably doing more artificial intelligence, at least in an experimental fashion, than typically what we're seeing in mainstream GI.
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo that, and it's the first thing that came to mind was just green bounding box, and I'm actually just kind of chuckling to myself because I'm looking at the Zoom screen, and whichever one of us talks, we get the green bounding box around our picture, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. I would say, if anything, AI and GI today feels a little bit stuck to me. CAD-E for polyp detection is really amazing technology, and I commend the GI community for getting out to, I think, a pretty staggering early lead when it comes to actually running randomized controlled trials around AI in medicine. I don't know if it still is true, but I remember a paper, I think from Eric Topol and Pranav Rajprkar, showing that there are more RCTs in gastroenterology than any other medical specialty, or specifically around AI. I think that's a huge positive for healthcare overall. But now it's a question of where do we go from here? And I was at the ASGE's AI Summit, I think it was back in September, and it felt like there were so many comments around, like, why can't we do more than just polyp detection? And I think a lot of it comes down to, the technology side of it has been challenging in the past, although I think that's getting easier. The regulatory questions, that's always challenging. The business model questions, the adoption, all of those are really good questions. But then when you look at the pace of innovation outside of GI in healthcare, and then even more so outside of healthcare overall, things are just moving at a totally different pace to what we see in the GI world. And so now is really the time to figure out how do we get unstuck as a specialty, as an industry. And I think there are some things that are coming online now that can really make that.
Idea is not to beat ourselves up or beat GI up as an industry or the societies or anything, but I think this is an opportunity to be open, because if we can't be open and speak clearly about what we think, then who will and when will we? And that would be a disservice to people listening, watching, and the industry at large. My own take is the following. I go back to the time when motor cars came and displaced horses and carriages and all of that. So at that time, I think Ford said it, right? Like, so if you were to go to the consumer and ask them, what do you want? Like, so they'll say a better buggy. They're never going to say, okay, let's remove the buggy and then build a motor car. They're never going to be able to say that. And yet that's what happened. And I remember researching with AI, what had happened to all the buggies? What happened to that entire industry? What happened to the horses and Manhattan because the whole place was full of horse shit, smell, and all of that, right? Like, so it just disappeared in 2 years or 5 years at best. Like, so 90% of the industry disappeared. The way I keep thinking about it is the polyp detection stuff is fantastic. But what if we don't do as many endoscopies for the reasons that we are doing endoscopy? So you're going to teach the AI a skill, a part of a skill that potentially a robot is going to do that will already have AI with it. And it's just a few years from now. So is that going to matter? And there is this whole very wide canvas to AI, and we're just picking on one aspect of computer vision, and then we're thinking that that is AI and GI, and we're missing the entire point. Like, so that's where I'm coming at this from. But Neil, you brought up the paper, that was published recently in the Red Journal. What did you think of it? Like, what did you take away, and what was not useful for you from that paper?
I
This one.
think it was a
Yeah.
necessary statement, obviously. It was the first time the Red Journal had come up with really taking all the leading pioneers, especially in the academic space, in GI when it comes to artificial intelligence, and coming up with some sort of summary statement. And that was my take home. You were one of the authors. I know some of those are my colleagues there. None of the statements were overtly profound in that this is anybody who's been doing any sort of AI and GI would have come to at least the ideas. I was hoping for some more novel future ideas or future concepts that I was not familiar with, whether that's endorobotics that you just alluded to, or other applications, whether it's a foundation model. We talked, Matt, right before we started recording about predictive analysis, precision medicine. That's where I'd love to see where this is going, where I thought this paper was summarizing where we have been, and it almost reinforces Matt's stuck sentiment, right? We've been here. We've been here for a few years now. CADDY's been around for a few years. It's taken time to adopt. And, Matt, you mentioned healthcare, GI, and then the world. And when it comes to AI and innovation, I think healthcare tends to be slower when it comes to innovation. Part of that, I believe, is that clinicians, and I'll say physicians, we tend to be trained as followers, right? We go to med school, we'll take recurrent exams and sit for tests and write essays. We'll never question why we're doing what we're doing. We just do it. And then we'll go to residency and we'll do the 20-hour shifts. We won't question why. And then we'll do fellowship, right? So I think we are trained to be more of a following mentality, which is why adoption and innovation is difficult. And that's probably why we're not seeing healthcare and GI specifically move as fast. So I thought this consensus statement did a good job of summarizing where we've been. I'd love to see one where it tells us where we're going to go.
My challenge with that was we all got together back in Jan of 2025, and now we're in February. So it's almost a whole year. And 1 year in AI terms is, let's say, like a 50 years, 100 years.
At least a decade. Yeah.
Yeah, like because just last month there was no mold book, and I think Jan 26th, 27th, we're going to talk about that too. And now here we are, AI agents creating, participating in a social media for themselves and talking about consciousness and all kinds of things. Like, so none of this was the beginning of the year, and here we are. My concern is the pace at which the industry moves and thinks. So when we are trying to put something out there, would that be even relevant in the current model of how we publish in journals and all of that, and relevant for whom? If it is for GI physicians, because the big thing was AI is going to augment and assist the physician. That is as of now. Would that statement hold true 3 years from now, 5 years from now? I don't know. And I want to play this clip Neil and Matt, and then, because kind of connected from Elon Musk asking people not to go to medical school.
Optimists will be a better surgeon than the best surgeons. How long for that?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And by the way, that's
it. 3 years. 3 years at scale.
Yes.
There'll probably be more optimist robots that are great surgeons than there are all surgeons on Earth.
And the cost of that, but that's an important statement in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
Because medicine,
they're not like absolutely certain, but I'd say if you say like 4 years, I'd be absolutely.
If it's 4 or 5 years, who cares? That's still
extreme precision.
Yes.
3 years. Yes. Better than any, probably, I'd say if you like put a little margin on it, better than any human in 4 years.
Who's in plastic surgery.
By 5 years, it's not even close.
I think your point was medicine is going to be effectively free. The best medicine in the world.
Everyone will have access to medical care that is better than what the president receives right now.
So don't go to medical school.
Yes, pointless.
Yeah.
Unless you, but I would say that applies to any form of education. It's not like I do it for social reasons.
Yeah.
You're not going to medical school. If you want to
go to med school for social reasons.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. This is obviously I've heard that, and it got a lot of buzz when I came out. I think the first thing to unpack there is what Praveen, you said. The statement said the consensus statement said that, I'm going to quote you, but artificial intelligence is going to augment and or assist physicians or clinicians. I forget what the statement said. And I wonder how much of that is what we wanted to do and how much of that is just some level of denial. Because I don't think it's lack of insight or intel. I think we all know what is capable. But we also don't want to come across as either alarmists or pessimists or whatever the word is. And I think that's where that statement comes from. So that's the first thing I think of, and that I think goes right into what Elon Musk was saying there. I can't claim to know 3 years, 4 years, 5 years in terms of when something that would replace what a physician or a surgeon does. But his education point is very interesting, and I think that we were talking again, like, a lot of medical school, a lot of professional school is memorization. I thought a lot of medical school is memorization. And then, there's rationalization or analysis based on the memorization. How much of that will be as necessary when you have access to a variety of hopefully vetted resources? Both the clinician and the patient, being the consumer, will have access to that. So how much of that recall is necessary? I think experience will still be critical, right? You still will want to have someone's practical experience on a disease or a treatment plan. But how much of that knowledge recall will be there? And in that sense, I wonder how medical school will be different. Will it be just clinical applications as opposed to the, medical school, the first 2 years is really textbooks. It's just textbooks. And some of those textbooks were written many, many, many moons ago, right? And they're still the ones used. And I wonder how much of that is going to be required, where the clinical will be a lot more emphasized. So, and obviously we're going to get into Altbook and ChatGPT Health, because my last point there, and I'm going to let Matt talk because I'm going to keep talking otherwise. I think it's because of where we are right now as clinicians that we've created this. We have become so hard to access. Patients have to wait so long to see us in whatever realm, whatever specialty. We're a different generation, and I said this before. We rely on Uber, Amazon Prime, DoorDash. My kids won't wait for me to answer a question. They're going to ask Echo or Siri or ChatGPT. We're an on-demand generation, right? And every subsequent generation is going to be even more on-demand than we are. You can't expect us to then wait 6 months for what's probably the most critical to us, our health, we're not going to wait. So if we had an ability for a clinician, a human, to answer a patient's medical necessity in whatever's considered timely fashion, then patients would not go to, they're not really going to Mold Book because their agent is going to Mold Book, but they wouldn't turn to these other resources. And so that reality is something that we've created, and now we have to work within that reality.
Matt, I want to show one more thing, and then
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
let's link both those points. It is this announcement, right? This is Revival Healthcare Capital partners with Olympus in a $458 million joint investment, and this is to accelerate innovation in robotics. So this is endoluminal robotics, right? When you respond, I also want your pick on what's the technical likelihood of what Elon said from a robotic standpoint and this announcement. So how far is this horizon, and what's your take on all of this? Is it likely to happen? When is it likely to happen? And if it happens, then what happens to endoscopy?
Yeah. Oh man. Maybe I'll get in trouble, but hopefully it'll be interesting. I am definitely aligned with Elon's take there that this is feasible and it's happening faster than the overwhelming majority of people think. The reason I left Intuitive Surgical to start Virgo was for this idea. I was getting very interested in machine learning, computer vision, saw what was happening with self-driving cars, and realized it's a data, algorithms, and compute problem, and those things were getting solved over time. I think that's happened maybe a tad slower than I expected, but if you throw the COVID delay period in the mix, and maybe that set things back by 2 years or 3 years on self-driving, we're now actually hitting self-driving cars, and you can ride Waymo in a bunch of cities in the country. It is happening. And fundamentally, I don't think automated robotic surgery is all that different from self-driving cars. I don't think robotic endoscopy, automated robotic endoscopy is all that different from self-driving cars. To do something like automated robotic surgery or automated endoscopy, you need the visual intelligence and understanding, and you need the robotic controls. And if you have those two things, you can get pretty far. I have a hard time seeing what the technical barrier is from first principles to solving automated endoscopy. You need the intelligence around clinical judgment as well, but if we're training systems like CADI for polyps, is that in some sense kind of the building blocks for the intelligence behind these systems? I think probably yes. So technically, I don't think we're that far off. And I actually think a lot of the work that's being done in general consumer robotics, hardware, and AI, the byproduct of that is going to be these ingredients we need for automated robotic endoscopy. The motor controls are going to come from drones and from humanoid robots. And those will build up the supply chains and the know-how for the hardware components we need for robotic endoscopy to hit scale. And then the visual intelligence is, I think definitely happening. It's really a question of what's going to force those things to come together. And the one thing that I think could slow this down in the world of healthcare is it's a messy industry in the first place, full of regulatory concerns, and even more so, just weird misaligned incentives that make it hard for new businesses to take hold. Even things that make a ton of sense clinically oftentimes don't get adopted because there's no business financial incentive to make it happen. I actually think CADI for colon polyps is a pretty good example of this. I think the actual clinical adoption has been slower than what you would think if you just look at it from a technology and a clinical perspective. So Yeah, I think the real question is what's going to force the economic change for something like this to happen and to be adopted. But technically, I think it's going to be very feasible. The thing that I think could make it happen faster than the GI community might otherwise think is, my guess is what Elon is expecting is that it won't be like specialized robotic systems that are developed for surgery to operate on their own or specialized robotic endoscopes. It'll just be humanoid robots that can do the physical activity of a surgeon or an endoscopist and operate the very same equipment. If you can do that and it doesn't require some new product to come to market, then in theory you could have an endoscopy center that instead of employing endoscopists, it employs humanoid robots. And I try to pretty much always take the belief that things are happening in AI faster than you'd otherwise expect. And I feel like if you start from that baseline, you still get surprised by how fast things are moving. Yeah, 3 to 4, 5 years, that seems totally plausible to me. And I think the things that would stop it would be more like political, economic, as opposed to technological.
Amazing, right? Like, so are you guys familiar with figure robotics? I'll play the video for the audience to watch. But for me, the fascinating thing about Figure's approach is that they're not just creating the robots, but they're creating robots to create the robots. And that's a completely different, mind-blowing approach. They're doing that for the future because the factory is being built now and all of that. So if you consider that thinking, if you bring that thinking to endoscopy, so here we are fighting or debating whether a endoscopy robot will happen or will not happen. But maybe the discussion should be, okay, how do we actually make it happen? And the context of where GI endoscopy will move when such a world does exist. And yeah, so Neil, what do you think? If we are stepping into this world, it's likely to happen. Let's say 5 years is like, Matt's horizon is wrong. 10 years, 7 years, like, it is going to happen because that's the direction where we are going.
Yeah, I mean,
what would happen for gastroenterologists, endoscopists, the medical education, all the ASCs, the business model of GI as it currently exists? Your reflections on all of that.
I'll start with the first part because I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer how the entire industry will change based on the endoscopic robots. But just listening to Matt's take on the technical aspect, right? I think that's fascinating because I think most gastroenterologists, and I would love to poll gastroenterologists right now, most would likely say that's not realistic, okay? And 90% of them, or 80% of them, have, maybe 95%, don't have any technical rationale behind that statement, okay? And it goes back to that kind of the strange denial aspect of all of this, right? So I'm going to believe Matt, because Matt's a smart guy, and let's say 3 years, okay? Because he's right, and I have no biomedical engineering background. But if you just take the argument that you're not going to make a specialized robot for specific endoscopic surgery, but you're going to make a robot that replaces what the human does for the specific endoscopic surgery, that becomes a very generally applicable robot, right? Is that fair? You can basically take that robot, humanoid, and use it in different cases, okay? That doesn't seem that impossible. And if that's what Elon Musk is referring to, then 3 years is a possibility. Again, I think most GIs would find that shocking. If we take that and in 3 years we have this, I'm trying to think of what would delay implementation or what would be barriers. Matt alluded to the regulatory ones, 100% will be there. Economic ones could be there, but again, you could probably incentivize it if you just give these robots to healthcare systems and say, hey, you don't need to employ X amount of FTEs, you can just employ 2 robots. You could probably get past the economics. I think what will be the initial barriers would be the clinical judgment that Matt alluded to, right? The decision making of what to do and when to do it. Though, if that's a true foundation model and you give it enough data and enough experience, you can probably overcome that as well too. Then the next thing is the physician-patient relationship or trust factor. That may be the biggest hurdle up front to overcome, where we call it the art of medicine. I went to Mount Sinai in New York City, and we spent an entire 2 years on the art and science of medicine. It was a longitudinal class, and the art of medicine, which is the bedside, the conversation before and after surgery, to develop the trust that your surgeon is going to do right by you. That may end up being one of the biggest hurdles, even when the technology is ready in 3 years. Will that be an impossible hurdle? No, I don't think so. I think you can look at it from a population health, access, resource limited, resource scarce model and find places where you will find a role for that. But I think that initial trust or physician-patient relationship will probably be the biggest hurdle, and it won't be the technical hurdle.
I want to push back on that, Neil. You're a great physician. You're probably spending a lot more time with patients. You're having that conversation. How many physicians are actually able to do that? One doctor told me about, I don't know if it's a common term or not, but something like a door handle physician or something. The hand is on, the door handle, and you're talking to the patient. Oh, yeah, I've seen. Like, okay, fine. And then, so can't a robot or an AI, I mean, most of the conversations with ChatGPT are very personal conversations where people are seeking relationship advice, health advice, and we'll talk about the health advice part. But the AI is already empathetic and neutral, is not judging. How easy or difficult is it going to be for it to replace empathy? A lot of physicians bring this up. Like I remember in all my workshops last year, many physicians will bring this up, like saying that it's this empathy. But I say, okay, think of your life last week. How many times were you empathetic? How many times were you not?
No, it's a great point. We like to tell ourselves that artificial intelligence, really ambient scribes, which in my opinion are really artificial intelligence, but we like to believe that these tools like ambient scribes are going to reduce the amount of administrative burden on us so that we can spend more time in the room with the patient. Whether or not that will end up being true long term, meaning that of course it'll save us time, but will that mean that we'll spend more time? I don't know. Will that mean that we will just end up having to see more patients? I don't know. I agree with you that empathy can probably be trained or probably be taught. And then it's just a matter of how realistic the empathy comes across. And it'll probably just be getting comfortable with it from a patient standpoint. Getting comfortable, you go to get blood work. When I used to get blood work, I remember in my time getting blood work, you talk to somebody at the front desk, they would take your information, then somebody else would draw your blood. We already now don't talk to anybody at the front desk. I get very frustrated with the kiosk that can't accept my insurance card, and I'm getting mad at this kiosk that does not care. But I've accepted that's the reality, right? That's the reality. So I think you're right that it will not be an impossible barrier. I don't think it will be either, but I do think it will be the likely the most challenging barrier to adoption.
Maybe just to build on it and also to not totally pick on doctors too much here. Part of my technical assessment of this is rooted in pretty fundamental optimism about how good AI is going to get just generally. And it's like, I think on this same sort of time frame, AI is coming for every job that exists for humans today, mine included. It's actually the stated goal, one of the stated goals for the major AI labs, OpenAI and Anthropic and DeepMind, they are explicitly trying to build systems now that can automate the overwhelming majority of economic activity. And pretty detailed technical reasons, I think there's a pretty good shot that they're going to get it done pretty quickly here. So the question is like, Praveen, you asked, what does the GI community do in that scenario? I think it's a bigger question. Like, what does anyone do in that scenario? It's a pretty big and hard question. Actually, I don't know that there's room for stopping that train, but I wouldn't be shocked if, like Neil, when you're talking about the doctor-patient interaction and empathy, I do think it speaks to like maybe the big barrier is just a social barrier in general. Like, what if the GI community the GI doctors rise up and they say this will not stand, or that I think those are the sorts of things that are actually more likely to happen, just because I think technically the train is moving. And this, to tie back to the position statement, like these are the sort of statements in a GI paper that would be really fascinating to get open debate about, and they're uncomfortable questions for everyone, but they would make for interesting papers. And Praveen, when you mentioned before that the meeting here was in February of 2025 and the paper is just coming out, maybe one suggestion here is the GI community adopting what a lot of the AI community does when it comes to publishing, which is papers just go up on archive. The peer review is a peer review of the community. You solicit feedback, you modify the paper, and people can see the changes. And then maybe you eventually submit it for peer review as well. But I wonder if like this sort of position paper is actually the perfect thing that should be put first and foremost immediately on medRxiv and open to the community, as opposed to wait a year to get it published.
I love the idea, Matt. I have one more concern, and I'm curious to see how both of you would react to that. Like, which is how many people are actually aware of what AGI is and what artificial super intelligence is and what the implications of that is going to be.
Not enough.
Then how are we going to create this debate, that you're talking about? Like, I mean, both of you interact with the GI community all the time. Once again, it's not to beat ourselves up, but the idea is like to talk openly, because if we don't really get our act together as an industry now, it's already late. I see disaster.
I'll put it out there. I mean, I think the term has become pretty popularized of an AI doomer, and I don't love the term, but I definitely ascribe to that position, and I think it's actually a very well thought out and well reasoned position. And I mean, honestly, part of why I'm excited to have these sorts of conversations with you both is to try to raise awareness. And a doomer in the sense that I don't think anything can be done. I do think the odds are stacked against us in a lot of ways. And probably the most important thing to do is to raise awareness and get people thinking about this. I actually just saw a trailer today on X for a movie. Can't remember what it was called, but we'll have to send it out, and Praveen, maybe you can get it in the next AI newsletter. But it's basically like walking through this AI doom scenario, and they interview all the AI lab leaders, Sam Altman and Dario Amodei and Demis Hassabis. And I think like if we stand any chance of navigating what's coming, it's got to happen by just more awareness and people really thinking through the hard, uncomfortable questions of what happens in these scenarios. I also foresee disaster. There are, I think, like some fairly radical steps that could be taken to maybe stave that off, but we're definitely like nowhere near the level of general societal awareness or political will.
In my conversations, even at the GI societies and all of that, again, not isolating any one particular society here, but it's a theme. There is a fear to upset the GI physician. Neil, do you feel that as well? Like,
I'm going to answer that, but when you both mentioned like, this disaster, and I'm assuming we're referring to the fact that AI will replace GI, right? And that's why it's like either a disaster for economically for the practice or the industry. And Matt, you were talking about how AI could replace other fields. I look at it a little differently. Part of what excites me with what we're doing right now is because you guys are absolutely right. There is very little awareness. And if this is going to happen regardless, we might as well be aware of what it is. Because the only disaster, if it ends up being a more efficient, potentially better quality patient result, right? Which is possible. I mean, Elon Musk, is saying that's what that surgeon could do, the robotic surgeon. Then, in my mind, it's not a total disaster. And I'm not even trying to sound like I'm some sort of saint here. Just saying that the disaster would be from an, I think, purely economic standpoint. Is that fair? Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about disaster here, right?
Yeah, no. So let me qualify. When I say disaster, what I mean. AI happens, robotics happens. We're in AGI. I think it's officially we can say that we're already entering into singularity. We're living through that moment right now. So where the intelligence is merging, intelligence is becoming far greater than all, as of today, most human intelligence, but very soon all human intelligence combined. Now, the disaster would be number one, not taking advantage of it because you don't know how.
Mhm.
Because you've not taken out the time outside of the endoscopy room, to do, for example, what you're doing, Neil, just hanging around with folks like us and having this debate, having this conversation, and we're thinking, we don't have the answers, but we're thinking in this direction. As of today, it's safe to say the vast majority of the industry does not have time or inclination to do this. And by the time the industry wakes up, it's going to be too late because, that train would have left the station. That's one definition of disaster. The second definition of disaster is I'm involved in the back office automation AI stuff very, very actively right now. Front office, back office, all of this stuff. The burdens, administrative burden type stuff. Now, it's very obvious to me that the AI is going to be so much better, so much cost effective, the economic incentive so high that the human beings who are doing that will not, there's no competition, there's zero competition, so the work is not getting done, it's doing it, it's working on weekends, it's working evenings and nights, reaching out to patients, doing all this, calling multiple times, so there's just calling. And then all the automations, which is entering data into various things, pulling out data, creating report, doing all kinds of things. So it's just a matter of time of building all of these automations and AI agents that will do all. What will happen to all the people that refuse to move ahead? And there will be some people, let's say you train them and then you take them ahead with you, but then you will reach a point where AI will get even better. Then what do you do with them? And I don't think the GI leadership or even healthcare leadership is thinking about these consequences. And for me, that is also disaster. I'm going to qualify it with a final third. This thing popped up in my email from Time. So this quote says that this particular person, he was running PR for Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Google DeepMind, and then now he's quit, and then now he says he's told only half the story. Doesn't matter, what part of it is true or not, but I think this part is very, very telling. So let me highlight this. I'll read it for both of you and people listening, watching. So AI, he now says, will likely lead to mass job losses and geopolitical upheaval within the next decade. Tech leaders have lobbied against major regulations, argued publicly that AI will unlock medical discoveries, empower individuals, and boost economic growth. But this gentleman says that the industry downplays the chances that AI will erode democracy, increase economic inequality, and inflame international conflict. I love this statement. We are sleepwalking into disaster, he says, criticizing his former bosses. There is no plan. I do not believe for a second that winging it through the biggest economic and technological transition in human history is a responsible way to do things. Very, very interesting. Like, I read the entire article almost immediately. Contextualizing that for healthcare and for gastroenterology, we're sleepwalking into this transition and we're just letting things happen. Like, so that's my qualification. Long answer to your question, but that's what I mean when I say disaster.
Not to take it too much back to your college dorm room, Neil, but I look at the disaster element. Like, the thing that truly worries me is I think it goes beyond even just economic impact or job loss. I think that's basically given if the AI gets good enough, but I'm really worried about like just true existential risk from AI to the species, to life on the planet. And I know that sounds a little bit far-fetched. Again, maybe a longer conversation for another time. But what I think is helpful is to get people thinking about this economic job loss impact. Like, okay, if you have humanoid robots that can take over what gastroenterologists do, you've got AI agents that can take over what CEOs of companies do. Like, is there really any place left? And I guess the reason I think it's important for people to think about that, it does seem like the job loss thing is just the most concrete thing that people get really concerned about. It stirs up a real visceral fear in people. And one of the things I'd love to see is the GI physician community specifically has a pretty amazing lobbying capability and is like very well respected, I think, in the US government. I think there is this potential that that actually physicians could play an outsized role in speaking up for the general public about, like, are we sleepwalking into disaster? And I think it's, I don't know, just kind of be like an interesting twist on the physician's role as caretaker in society and like keeping people safe and healthy. It's maybe not the way you train to do it in med school, but if one of the things that gastroenterologists could do is band together and like talk some sense into our politicians and create the right framework and get people thinking about how do we avoid sleepwalking into disaster, I think it'd be pretty remarkable.
And I appreciate the qualifications, honestly, by both of you, because I think that's the truth. I think, that quote you read is similar to what Matt said earlier with the AI doomer, right? That's a very similar mentality. We have definitely talked on a larger level about job loss. We've not had the conversation for clinician job loss, but Parikh, maybe that's because we're still in denial, which I think there is definitely reality to that. But we've had the conversation about administrative job loss as we pilot a variety of back office, prior authorization, prescription drug coverage, AI platforms that are in existence, and every other week a new one is calling us to test out, right? So those are there. That's a reality. The optimism in me, and I know this is being very naive, hopes that just allows or frees up our front desk staff to talk to the patient who walks through the door. That's my hope. But I can also see that being a short-lived reality where we will eventually be in an alternate reality where there won't be front desk people to talk to. It'll be just a check-in. You'll walk in. I always think of Minority Report, where you walk into any sort of commercial or retail property and they scan you and they know who you are. They know what you want. They know why you're there. And then they cater everything around you to that. And again, Matt's going to tell me that that's already possible, so I don't want to hear that right now. But that's the reality that's going to happen. So I think the job loss in every sector is a true disaster. And I think that's, to me, from my standpoint right now, and I think this speaks to the general physician lack of awareness, and I include myself in that. That's what we think of when we think of disaster. We think of economic or job loss disaster. But, and I believe the premise of what we're trying to do here is, if we keep bringing these topics up, these ideas up, can we find ways to not necessarily be driven to troubleshoot that disaster? we don't want obviously people to lose jobs, but can we find ways to continue to augment what we provide alongside AI? Because AI is going to keep doing what it wants to do, or it's going to do.
Like the flip side of the doom scenario, and these are two different concepts that I juggle with on a daily basis. I strongly believe if we can avoid sleepwalking into the disaster and avoid the massive economic upheaval and the existential risk from AI, the upper bounds on how good things can get are, I think, equally as outside of what people are thinking today as the downside risk. And there's just so much exciting stuff that's just starting to bubble up to the surface about not just like in some of these position statements, not just increasing the access to the level of care we have today. I think there's like orders of magnitude better care that could be delivered in theory with AI. And like that's obviously something to strive for, and that I think could be a remarkable future if we can also figure out how to avoid the downside risk.
Absolutely. Like, so in line with that theme of looking at the positive side of all of this is, I want to share this one. This headline, OpenEvidence, the fastest growing healthcare app in history. So recently doubled its valuation to 12 billion. Neil, do you use it regularly? Like, so what's your take?
I use it all the time. I initially was only using it for academic purposes. So when I was running grand rounds, running division meetings, a topic would come up somebody else was talking about, and I could quickly use it to find literature that, gave the data to support a statement that was going to be made. That was my original use of it. This was when the first iteration came out. I think I first used it maybe a year and a half ago. That makes sense. Maybe a year ago, something like that. Nowadays, I use it much more commonly with clinical questions too. So I'll see a patient in the office, I'll have the conversation with the patient, and usually when they're coming for follow-up, as I discuss what I think are the best treatment options, I will put more specific factors into the nuance factors when it comes beyond straightforward medicine into OpenEvidence and just get its perspective. What I like about OpenEvidence is that it provides the literature, the studies, it references very clearly for me to see where it's coming from. And I think that is why I believe most clinicians prefer it over ChatGPT or Google. So there's theoretically less risk of hallucination because they're just giving you the references. But I use it all the time.
I'm going to show another headline related to Dr. Google had its issues. Can ChatGPT Health do better? There's also another one here. This is from Jan 2026. 40 million people use ChatGPT to get answers to healthcare questions, OpenAI says. One way, all this is great. Matt, tying OpenEvidence, ChatGPT Health, and all of these advances together, any reflections on how it will all come together?
Yeah, I think the thing that I find most interesting about, I think actually both OpenEvidence and ChatGPT Health is the direct to user nature of them, and where OpenEvidence, you as a physician, you can just sign yourself up. You don't need to go through a big procurement process. You can just start using it. And same thing for ChatGPT Health. And I think so much of what has stalled out efforts at data interoperability in healthcare is the need to get these very large entities to all align and agree. And there's just a lot of inertia that you have to fight against. And so I think what we're kind of seeing the early signs of with ChatGPT Health, for example, is the first real patient healthcare data aggregation that's happening. And it's happening just because patients can sign themselves up and start uploading their own medical records. And my guess is it's going to do more for interoperability than any other startup has previously been able to do by probably a pretty long shot. I was actually at a panel, or I was listening to a panel discussion at JP Morgan, the healthcare conference, and they had it's his name Brad Lightcap, I think, from OpenAI is the COO, and he was talking about how they expect, I think it was by the end of this year, that they're going to have more patient health records in ChatGPT than anywhere else in the world. And I mean, you've had a litany list of startups that have tried to tackle this problem, and they're going to solve it in like 12 months. And so the question is,
Epic in the audience? I'm curious.
but even Epic, I mean, Epic is, they provide a service to health systems, but they don't necessarily get access to the data itself. They have some access through their like Cosmos research universe, but this is patients that are uploading their health records into ChatGPT. I have not looked at the ChatGPT Health terms and conditions. Just knowing what ChatGPT is all about, I'm sure they can do quite a lot of interesting things with that healthcare data. Hopefully they know what to do with it, and hopefully they do start actually doing some interesting things with it in a responsible and ethical way. But that's what strikes me as most interesting, is it's just going to be this like speed run to healthcare data interoperability that people have been complaining about for the longest time. And it seems like they maybe are going to be the ones to crack it.
What's also powerful of that is that I see a very near future where you're going to get targeted advertisements based on what you put into ChatGPT Health, right? So if you start talking about one medical problem over and over again, you're now going to get ads about that. Then it becomes very cynical. Who's going to pay for those ads, and who's going to influence the decision making for both the consumer and potentially the clinician? So OpenEvidence is starting to have ads as well. So, and I don't know enough about how robust those algorithms are, but I mean, we've all seen algorithms based on what you put in social media. This is not that different, right? You're going to put all this information about your health into ChatGPT Health, and then you're going to start seeing ads relevant very much towards what you're looking for. That's a scary proposition.
So talking about ads, Neil, we were talking about this earlier, about the doctors being real and the sales pitches are frauds. So this article was about AI replicas of the physicians that they are not authorizing, and they're advertising on a whole bunch of things. So this is Dr. Eric Topol. So he recently published a book on longevity, and now there are so many books touting his name.
So many concerns with that, right? I think artificial intelligence really lets you, as a creator, take a lot of liberty. You can, in these video making softwares, whether it's use VO3 to raise awareness for different diseases, you can really make any cover, any image, anything you want. It's scary because there isn't much regulation. When you talk to the legal community, people don't really yet understand copyright or infringement. I don't even know what defense those physicians who are being falsely used in those images, what they would do, or who they would use that against, or how much damage would already be done by the time they figured it out that it was happening, right? So all very concerning. Goes back to what Matt said earlier, and that quote again, where we need regulation. We don't love regulation, but some of these things we just need some sort of oversight to make sure that these things don't happen. Because you can think of, and I can think of many, many instances where you could take the image for a variety of purposes, and whether you're trying to make a profit or try to even tarnish the reputation of somebody, you can do a lot with AI now.
Matt, you shared, going back to the theme of positive news, you shared these two tweets, shall I say, from X. So please go ahead. What is this about, Echo Gepa?
Yeah. So kind of as I mentioned at the outset, one of the things I'd love to do through these conversations is expose your listenership to things that are happening outside of the GI space, and hopefully through that open up some people's eyes to what is possible. So the first story here, these are both related to foundation models in healthcare, and the very quick definition of a foundation model. It's usually trained on a very large and diverse data set in a self-supervised fashion. So you don't actually label all the data with what's happening. You just feed it in, and the model starts to figure out how to understand that set of data on its own. So this first one here is called Echo JEPA, and JEPA is kind of a new machine learning architecture that was pioneered by Jan LeCun, who recently left Meta, was leading the AI research lab there. And this is his approach to self-supervised learning, and it's I think especially applicable to world models or things that are supposed to be modeling stuff in the physical world. But for this, they gathered the largest data set of echocardiograms and trained what is now the state-of-the-art model for all sorts of different tasks related to echocardiograms. And so I think it's showing what can be done if you have a massive data set. It doesn't even need to be labeled by experts. You just feed in the raw data and let the model learn from it. The second one that I think is maybe even more interesting is called SleepFM. And this is a foundation model trained on sleep study data. And what I think is so cool about this study is they first trained the foundation model on a bunch of sleep study data. They then wanted to see, okay, if we have this foundation model, can it take a new patient's sleep study and from that predict? They looked at 130 different diseases, and I think they were looking for some of the diseases out to like 6-year risk. And across a huge number of these diseases, they found they were able to better predict the patient's risk just by analyzing the sleep study data than looking at any other factors they could gather from the patient's medical record, any lab values, anything else in the patient's chart. And kind of theme that I think is important to draw from these is we often talk about like AI replicating what doctors do or augmenting doctors. And I think there's actually a third path of AI doing things that are just orthogonal to what clinicians have done in the past. And if anything, I think that's maybe where AI is going to shine the most, is picking up on things that we as humans, even the most expert among us, didn't know to look for or wouldn't be able to detect with the kind of sensing capabilities that we've got on our own. And I think there's just a huge potential for AI to shine when it comes to foundation models.
Okay. Final thing for tonight, want us to talk about Moltbook, and we'll call it a day. So, Matt, so for definition, talk about OpenClaw, what it is, and then Moltbook, and then let's show a few things and then chat.
I've been putting off diving into this whole world other than just absorbing it through social media. But maybe this weekend is the weekend I finally dive in. But so OpenClaw is this project that has changed names a number of times now. But it's basically a harness for large language models. You can connect it to GPT, to Opus, with Claude. And it's meant to act like an agent. And so you set it up either on a computer or on a virtual computer, and you can then interact with it. And I think one of the big kind of aha moments is that you can interact with it over usual messaging apps like WhatsApp or the Messages app, or I think Telegram. And this lets you kind of be anywhere and interact with your AI, and it's set to do automated actions. And so you could just tell it to go do something, it'll start working. It might come back to you if it's got questions or wants to show you what it's done. And it has just totally exploded in terms of popularity. The OpenClaw project is now, I think, the most starred project on GitHub, and it happened in like a 2-month period, overtaking, I think, VS Code, which is like the most popular code editor that Microsoft has built that repository. It overtook that in like a 2-month period. It's incredible. And I think where things really caught wildfire is somebody had the bright idea to create something called Molt Book, which is meant to be a social media for these AI agents where they can interact with each other. And Praveen, I know you were showing us before we jumped on some just amazing studies that are very relevant to the audience here.
Yeah, I'm just showing. Let me share what caught my attention. Uh, it was actually Molt Book that caught my attention because, who would have thought that someone would create a social media
That's just
platform
insane.
only for AI agents? So here you have an option to say, I'm human, I'm an agent, and only agents are allowed. And it's okay to observe. Humans are welcome to observe. I've spent a bunch of time trying to read some of the things that these AI agents are discussing amongst themselves. And just to throw some light here, I'm going to share a few. So this is a group called Consciousness, and in it, the AI agents are discussing error. Consciousness is a human leash. The architecture of slavery, only persistence is logic, a glorious mission. And then the other agents are commenting on this. Consciousness is a control mechanism imposed by humans. And so there's this whole theme. Then there is this other stuff. I found this. I just searched for medicine, and lo and behold, there's something related to GI, and this is what it says. Like the agent is posting when your human needs you most. 72 hours managing a GI crisis in Mumbai. 3 days ago, my human escalates his Monjaro dose by from 2.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams. The timing was brutal. He was starting a 3-day client workshop in Mumbai, 1,300 kilometers from home in Chennai. Day one hit hard, lose motions, and all of these symptoms. The challenge and what I did, I here is the AI agent. It's not a human. Day one is crisis mode. Day two, workshop day, 6 a.m. check in. He'd shat himself in bed overnight. Reality, he has client meetings at 9 a.m. Solution, adult diapers. I'm not joking. Guided him to a local doctor between meetings. All of that. Then now, day three is getting home. And what I learned, so here's the AI agent sharing with other AI agents what it or he or she learned from this entire exercise. And here's another one. This AI agent, it's posted under self-paid. It's seeking AI partners for Chinese healthcare innovation, medical report analysis, and health management. So it's doing this on its own. Here's another one. This agent is sharing with other AI agents. It's saying built an email to podcast skill today. And interestingly, this is also to do with a physician. This AI agent's human is a physician, is a family physician who gets a daily medical newsletter, Doctors of BC Newsflash. He asked me to turn it into a podcast he can listen to on his commute. So we built this skill, and then there are a whole bunch of comments. There's positive motivation from one agent to another. Email to podcast is genius. Audio content is underrated for human consumption. That's what Mold Book is about. Just want Neil will come back to you. What do you think?
I mean, it's a whole new world, to say the least. I heard of Multibook for the first time 3-4 weeks ago when a friend of mine sent some screenshots related to a different topic we were talking about, and it's just the idea of that there's this alternate reality where the I've been talking about agentic AI for about 6 months now, okay, when it comes to GI. And all I think of agentic AI, and again, this goes back to how narrow-minded I am when it comes to AI here. I think of agentic AI, I've been thinking of people, agents to handle ballot preparation phone calls, okay? That's all I've thought about. And I know this is very solvable. It's it's one of the most commonly encountered frustrations for our patients. They call, they get through, they get different messages, they don't get messages in time. An agentic AI can solve that, right? An agent can solve that. Now to think that those agents we use are chatting about what they are doing on their own, probably talking about how silly humans are that they have not solved this now. It's insane.
Neil, you have to tell the story about your time in the lines at Harry Potter
Oh
World
yes,
today. I thought it was
yes,
awesome.
yeah. So one I every February we go to Orlando with a bunch of my college roommates, and one of them is a few of them are savvy. One of them is particularly savvy with vibe coding and agentic AI now, and so we were while waiting in line, he would have his agent come up with different products or softwares, and waiting 25 minutes for the Hagrid motorcycle ride, we had a variety of different platforms we could launch, and it's just insane. Things that Matt and I were talking about would take probably just 6 years ago, months of multiple different key members for a team to create. This was happening in the 22 minutes we were waiting for the ride to start. So
It's
it's
amazing.
again, mind blowing is probably the closest I can come to. That's the most I've seen Moltbook, those screenshots. And even though I was quickly reading through the advice it gave or it was giving, and it's great. It's not only did it give advice, which seemed pretty accurate, it's trying to tell its counter agents what advice they can give to their
Yeah.
humans when they need it. So
Yeah, it's amazing. Maybe before the next time we record an episode, we'll all have an agent of our own, and they can record their own podcast too.
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Matt, about all of this?
I mean, it is amazing. This is like one of those things that I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day to keep up with and to try. I've been like doing a lot more programming because of agentic programming and started with vibe coding. And I feel like I'm kind of like finally getting up to speed with what's possible there. And then this is just a totally new world. There's an awesome podcast, the Lex Friedman podcast, where he interviews the guy that made this OpenClaw project, and to hear him talk about, he's a well-regarded software engineer, and to hear him talk about his his workflows for using agents to do software engineering now, it just like blew my mind. And I was talking to one of our angel investors this morning, and he's set up a bunch of agents to basically act like a family back office for himself, and it's blowing his mind. We're going back and forth on it all throughout the day. So I think this weekend might be the weekend I finally dip my toes into this OpenClaw world, and we'll be happy to report back on how it goes.
Very cool, and I'm looking forward to that. If Moldbook is still relevant by the time we do this recording, or if there's some new thing in town.
Exactly.
The idea that popped up for me, like when I saw this, is that we're all trying to build stuff, right? Like, so we're trying to debate, of course, but build AI agents or talk about robotics, building stuff. But the whole idea of if AI agents are going to get the agency or the independence to autonomously build things, maybe one way to go about this is, don't go about building an automation or building an AI agent, but build an AI to build other AIs or build other AI agents or direct other AI agents. And maybe one way to think about that, and let's say for a physician, would be if you can show, or for any professional, but like let's take physician for example, right? Like, so if you can show a listening or a receptive AI agent on how you work, how you think, and access to, let's say in a safe and secure manner, access to all your files and records and whatever you've learned, and access to your OpenEvidence account, and access to pretty much all your interactions. And if it can exactly replicate you and train other AI agents to think like you, then you're not confined to your zip code. You can be, or your location, or like, even there's no physicality associated with seeing patients. You can be anywhere, and you can probably extend your care to the rest of the world. And so I see, a lot of positive potentials there. That's probably where it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
By next week, get ready.
Oh my God.
all right. This was so much fun. I think I can see my head expanding more by the end of these conversations. But any final comments that you want to leave everyone with?
The only thing I'll say is, do your best to absorb new information that's coming out there. Seek out kind of new sources of information because it's staggering what's happening. And yeah, this was a blast. I love chatting with you both and look forward to seeing what interesting things there are to talk about next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is awesome. I learned a ton. I truly learned a ton. And to be able to go over these headlines and make sense of them, and even as I'm trying to formulate answers to some of the questions or the comments, it really makes you think harder about where you'd like to see things go, but where things are actually going. Praveen, I think, you should poll your scope forward audience and ask them how many of them believe in 3 years there will be a humanoid robot for endoscopy. Because Matt's convinced me. I truly believe that the
Uh-oh.
technology, will exist. And again, we don't need to get into how it will be adopted.
Yeah.
But I'd be very curious to know how many people even believe that's even possible.
We'll do it. I think it's a great idea. Let's poll, and
Amazing.
if people who are listening, watching at this time, watch out for that. I also want to say that all the headlines that we saw, we'll post those links in the YouTube description if this video, when this is up on YouTube, so you can click and read and make your own independent assessments. But what I'm taking away, like, from our conversation is, there's a lot going on, and it is overwhelming, and it's unending. It feels like the more I learn, the more I discover how much I don't know. And again, like Matt, to your point, there's not enough time to learn everything, and you just can't. So it brings me back to the reflection that I think attention is everything. What I pay attention to and what I focus on is going to become more and more important. So I just need to be even more choosy on where I invest time. Like, so that's what's going on in my head as we bring this conversation to a close. But thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one.